Hi, this time I wanted to talk about how the description of the different check results, skill checks, ability checks, even combat rolls, depending on how you handle them, they can break immersion. They actually steer off completely from role playing in tabletop role playing games if you handle them in what I would refer to as an incorrect way. Before I address that problem directly, I need to make some concepts quite clear. I have already talked about these concepts in another video, but either way, let's summarize things to get a better understanding. In other videos, yes, I have definitely talked about them, but here we are going to be a bit more precise when it comes to this particular issue. In tabletop role-playing games, you have the players participating as player characters, and you have another player that has become or taken the mantle of the dungeon master, game master, referee. Very different from the other players. That's why you usually refer to the others as players and the game master as the game master. The players embody the player characters. The player characters and the players, they become one. They live the adventure. It is not a passive experience. You are not watching a movie. You are not watching an anime series. You are not reading a book. You are not reading a book. You are not reading a comic book. You are not acting. Even though acting is active, actors in movies, in theatrical plays, they do not describe their actions, they act. Instead of saying, I point at that person, no, you point and you speak your dialogue as an actor. As an actor. People with low intelligence cannot understand this. Now, when it comes to dungeon masters, game masters, referees, they also play a role. It is quite a universal role. They play the role of the different non-player characters. They are called non-player characters because they are not the protagonists of the adventure or the scenario. They serve as the antagonists, they serve as the allies, but the action is not focused on them. The players do not know the agendas, the objectives, the plans, the things that are happening outside of their awareness. They don't know what the Duke is planning. They don't know what that soldier is going to attempt. They don't know anything about that. So the non-player characters are definitely a separate category from the player characters. The non-player characters are controlled by the dungeon master, game master, referee, etc. But he is not constantly focused on them. He's also going to be focusing on the world, on the hazards, on the weather, on the diseases, on the conflicts, etc. So as a dungeon master, game master, and whatnot, you also play the role of the world. The laws of physics, at least when it comes to the setting, the effects, the chemical, biochemical, biophysical effects, everything, the magical effects, the weird science effects, you are also determining all of that. Even if you want to randomize things, it always comes down to your interpretation of those random effects. And of course, in tabletop role-playing games, you are not telling a story about the characters. You are those characters. You are living that life. There is no audience. You are not role-playing as the members of some audience unless you are playing a specific tabletop role-playing game where you have a phase where you can role-play that. For example, in the Epoch horror role-playing game where you play it with cards, you have a phase where you play the roles of audience members and you are deciding what character is the most interesting character in a particular act or scene. But in tabletop role-playing games, even in Epoch, you are not telling a story. You are not part of the audience. When you are playing the role of your character, you are that character. You are not actors performing before some sort of audience. Even if you were to put your sessions in actual plays, we are living the experience. We are not actors following a script. And even if we didn't have a script, like I said, we are describing the actions of the player characters, the effects of the game world. We are not acting. You can apply acting in dialogues if you find it entertaining, but like I have said many times, it is not necessary. You could roleplay. I tell this or that to that non-player character. I draw out my sword and charge at the enemy. I do this, I do that, everything through description. But acting is fun. That's why you try to act the dialogues of the characters, but it is not necessary. It is like some people like to use props at the game table. Not necessary. If you like that, go for it, but not necessary at all. So we have those key concepts quite clear. When it comes to skill checks, attack rolls, anything that where the outcome is uncertain and you decide to randomize things, or even if there is an automatic success or automatic failure, or even if you are playing a dice-less, tool-less system, the game master is handling all of those effects, because even in real life, and remember, you are playing tabletop role-playing games to live the adventure, to play the role of your character, to be there, to actually experience those situations, those moments. Even in real life, when we try to accomplish different things, it is impossible for you to predict the exact outcome of those difficult, risky, challenging tasks. A very obnoxious, immersion-breaking, non-role-playing thing happens when you dismiss this. It's similar to this situation, those terrible ways of running tabletop RPGs, in fact, non-role-playing ways, in which the game master says something like, "You advance through the dark tunnel. As you make your way through the slimy walls, the water is dropping from the ceiling, staining your fine clothes. And then that stench invades your nostrils. And before you stands..." Okay, describe what you are seeing. First, super lazy on the part of the game master. Super lazy. Second, now it stops being a tabletop role-playing game. And now it's a storytelling game where the player is telling a story about what his or her character is seeing. In real life, if you are going in an unknown situation, territory, site, you cannot predict what is around the corner if you have never been to such a site. You cannot predict what sort of creature, being, person, beast, animal is going to appear as you turn around the corner, if there is something there. Unless you are using some sort of clairvoyance, precognition, right? And therefore you are still role-playing if you are using that power. I see that around the corner there is this and that, right? But if you're like, oh yes, and my character is seeing now this horrible beast and he has like fangs and claws. Now you're just telling a story about what your character is seeing. You're making things up. You have complete control, authorship of the story. You are not telling a story. You are living the adventure. You are playing a role. I think the most intelligent viewers are already figuring out where I am heading to or heading towards. When it comes to different difficult things to do in real life, let's say you are escaping from enemies and you're jumping very risky parkour-like type of situations, parkour or free running perhaps. You are making your way and you need to make this very risky jump towards a ladder or a stairway. Very risky jump from building to building. You cannot predict exactly what is going to happen to you if you fail. There are some videos of people doing parkour or even free running where they attempt those risky jumps. They fail. Some of them die. Some of them get severely injured. Do you think that person has a choice on how he or she is going to get injured? Even if you know how to land, you cannot predict which bones are going to end up broken. Otherwise, oh, I failed in real life, I failed my roll, my attempt to jump from this building to that part of the structure. Oh, well, I'm going to choose to land on my arm. Or I'm going to choose to land on my legs. I'm going to choose that my arm or my legs are injured instead of my face or my chest or my ribs. You cannot predict the outcome of failure. Otherwise, you will be in perfect control of every single failure. You cannot do it because it's a failure. The same comes with success. You are painting something, you are sculpting something, and it turns out incredible in the 3D world, right here, real life. Even if you envisioned it in your mind, even if you had like your sketches and all of that, it is now, if it's a successful task, it is now a masterpiece, much better than you imagined. You have outdone yourself. Or if you fail, you wanted to create like a wooden statuette of a horse, and you fail, and it ends up looking like a dog. Like those artists, those drawings, those sculptures, it ended up looking like a dog. It ended up looking like something else completely. When it comes to fighting, even the most skilled combatant cannot predict how the head is going to fall off if you decapitate it. If you shoot someone, you cannot predict the way in which the blood is going to pour, what the individual is going to do. Is he going to fall backwards, forwards, or downwards, or to the side? Is he going to try to stand up while clutching his wound, falling to his knee? You cannot predict any of that. You cannot predict it. If you are playing tabletop role-playing games, and the game master allows the players who only have control over their characters, their player characters, if the game master allows them to describe the outcomes of different checks, you have now fallen into storytelling. There are tabletop role-playing games that have meta currencies or meta resources or whatnot that allow you to insert some sort of narrative elements. Maybe you are playing Warhammer 40k, a tabletop RPG, Warhammer 40k, the version of. So the Tyranids are approaching, and you're playing Wrath and Glory, and you spend one of your points, and you say, well, maybe let's go into the game situation. I spend one of my points. I look around because I know that there is an emergency ladder. I point to the ceiling and say, look over there, an emergency ladder. Let me activate that. And you start to shoot your bolter. You shoot your bolter at the mechanism, and the ladder falls down. That's a narrative element that you have inserted because of that point, because that point is part of the game side of a tabletop role-playing game. It is a limited resource that falls into the strategy and tactics department. Your wise expenditure or use of those points where you need them the most to insert those narrative elements and allow your character to survive, because you are also playing a game, a tabletop role-playing game. So unless you have those game mechanics, elements, factors, rather mechanisms, if you allow the players to describe the outcomes of their successes and their failures, congratulations, you have now fallen into storytelling. You are out of role-playing. You are out of playing a character in a tabletop role-playing game or playing the effects of the world when it comes to the game master. So it's pretty clear. If you allow the players to describe the effects of their successes and their failures, you have now fallen into storytelling. The player is no longer a real individual within the fictional world that cannot predict the outcomes. Like I said, unless you have perhaps a camera that sees through the walls, unless you have precognition as a psionic power, unless blah blah blah, you cannot predict. You cannot predict things unless it is a mechanism tied to the rules. You cannot predict the outcome. You cannot describe the outcome of your successes and failures. You can describe what you are attempting to do. Because if not, if you don't keep on role-playing, you have now fallen into storytelling, describing what the character's failures are. I fail in this and that way. I succeed in this and that way. Congratulations, you are now telling a story about your character. You are no longer playing the role of your character. I think it's pretty clear. And remember, the Dungeon Master, Game Master, has no control over the player characters unless there is something that is controlling them, some perhaps hypnotism, mind control, some madness effect that allows you to take control of the player characters. You cannot control the player characters. It is outside of your duties as a game master, or outside of your, yes, the way that you roleplay the world and the non-player characters. You are not playing the role of the player characters. The same applies to the players. They cannot play the roles of the non-player characters. The moment they start playing the roles of the player characters in first or third person, effectively they become player characters. Pretty clear in my opinion. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know your own thoughts, questions, opinions. And thank you as always to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. And remember, roleplay solves everything. See you later.